This is a camera that I've been using for 5 years. And since its release back in 2016, I could honestly say that this camera still holds up to the expectations that most people have for cameras today. This camera has obviously withstood the test of time as a Micro Four Thirds camera, and with my time, it has changed everything. I first got this little beast of a camera back in 2020, and I gotta say that this camera was the start of pretty much my video interest here in YouTube. I first bought this camera back when I was looking to do some vlogging content, and I was really interested in 4YE. Still interested in those dudes today. I mean, they're Toronto legends. Come on, Crave.
Aren't they
I see you. I wanted a camera with extremely good quality that I could bring anywhere with me, and actually when I first got them, I got this with 2 other lenses. I think it's fair to say that this camera has spoiled me when it came to the image stabilization, because what's responsible for this smooth footage is a 5-axis image stabilization system. This combines shift stabilization from the lens and sensor. You also get another boost with E-stabilization, which acts like a warp stabilizer inside your camera. Now, the resolution in this camera is honestly a blessing, because this little assassin does 4K up to 30 frames per second, 422 8-bit, and 1080 up to 60 frames per second, 422 and an 8-bit. Now, I've danced and celebrated that this little small camera could shoot in slow-mo, and what I didn't know before getting the camera is that it's a Micro Four Thirds camera. Specifically, this one has a 16 megapixel sensor.
God, what is that?
And if you don't know what a Micro Four Thirds sensor is, let me show you. So this is the size of your average full frame sensor, and what a Micro Four Thirds sensor is, it's a 2 times crop of that full frame sensor. Now, due to the smaller sensor, things like field of view, low light, stabilization, dynamic range could perform differently between the sensor sizes. So don't let the small sensor size fool you, as the quality in this camera is still quite good. And due to the small sensor, the camera actually uses less power for it to work. And that just means they're able to load this camera with a shit ton of features. For example, like 10 custom buttons with 14 different custom options. There's also a custom down mode on the G85 that allows you to set and save up to 3 personalized camera settings. This actually enables you to quickly switch through the camera settings without actually going through the menu. There's also unlimited recording, good for long form content like podcasts. You can pretty much record until your battery runs out or your SDs do. So here's some honorable features that the Lumix G85 has. Focus peaking to help you rack your focus better. You have your exposure tools like your histogram and your zebras. For audio, you got an external mic input, and for photography, you've got an 8.4K photo and post focus feature. So this feature stacks photos together and allows you to change your focal point after the photo was taken. And last but not least, this camera has built-in Wi-Fi, and with the Panasonic app, it gives you the feature to control your camera remotely as well as transfer files all through Wi-Fi. One of the best things that I could say about the Lumix G85 is that the battery life is actually pretty reliable. If you carry like a good set of batteries with you, you might go through 1 or 2 during the whole day, but that third battery, it's not dying anytime soon if you decide to go for the whole day of shooting. But this is the G85 camera battery. It's the Panasonic DMW BLC12. That's a lot to say. And this battery has an average of 50 to 90 minutes. Though I realize that when you are using powered lenses that are that have image stabilization inside, they tend to use up some power from your battery, so you might see some draw from the battery if you have powered lenses attached to your camera. Let's take a minute to talk about the pros and cons of the G85. Starting with the pros, I really gotta say that the G85 does really well with the image quality. Coming from a camera that came out late 2016, I like that Lumix included 60 FPS for that slow motion footage. Of course, the image stabilization has to be on this list. It's very simple, it's very easy to use, and you could just pick up the camera and have stable footage just like that. And of course, again, with the help of the stabilized lenses, you're able to get better performances. We have the wireless connection that has been oh so good to me, as well as that unlimited recording. Guys, it feels good to not worry about runtimes. This camera is also pretty light, coming in at 2.25 pounds, and the camera is just really easy to hold with the grip. Now, it's time to talk about the cons. Here we go. The first con I'm gonna list is the small LCD screen. I understand that the camera is small, but so is the screen. The E-stabilization warp in this camera could get pretty wonky. Remember, this is the stabilization that the camera warps in your image, and so it gets baked in, so you can't actually remove it. So if you move too much or shake too much, you get this jelly effect that I would later use as a style. The autofocus in the G85 is another con. This camera has a contrast detection autofocus system, which just works best when the contrast in your image is high. So it doesn't work as well as phase detect autofocus, and you start to see that dip in performance when you're trying to shoot scenes with a shallow depth of field. And I see a similar drop in performance when I'm shooting in low light scenes. It just doesn't stick to the subject like I want it to. That's why I can't recommend it when I use it for client shoots. I still use it for my own purposes, but when I do, I still get shitty autofocus. I gotta put the low light performance as a con on this list. I could get exceptional low light performance out of this camera. And at times it really does surprise me because the image quality out of a full 8-bit Micro Four Thirds camera, it's still really good for today's standards. It can't be beat coming from the year that it came from a Micro Four Thirds camera. Is it on the con list? But when it comes to low light in the shadows, forget about it. What I'm showing you right now are examples of the noise that you could get out of the shadows because the dynamic range and the low light performance in this camera are hard to work with. So the camera does have high dynamic range and other features and tools to help with this. But in order to do that, it has to destructively tamper the footage in camera.
Dude, we don't want that.
But as a director and cinematographer, I like to have full creative control of my image. And so I learned to steer into the skid and shoot with these imperfections. Or add some freaking light into your scene. Of course, with the better understanding of lighting, I was able to hide some of these imperfections in my shots. Of course, with the help of my fastest lenses, like the Lumix 25 f1.7 and the Sigma Art 19mm f2.8, made filming in low light so much easier. It actually gave me the confidence to shoot towards the shadows again, and that I didn't have to worry so much about my footage breaking down so easily.
I think I like this camera.
Now keep in mind that the poor low light quality, the autofocus, the dynamic range has something to do with the Micro Four Thirds sensor, as this is a common trait of Micro Four Thirds cameras. Now there are some exceptions, but these cameras just do better than what the regular ones do. So who is this camera for?
Sure, sign me up.
I'll take it. Well, it's kind of for everyone. This camera is kind of like the jack of all trades, but you know, the master at none. Because for those of you who are thinking about becoming a content creator, this camera could support that. All you need is a little tripod and a mic. And if you're thinking about becoming a filmmaker, the camera has the flexibility for you to do that. As my first rig, it actually solved two issues for me. Since I have big hands, it gave me more to hold, as well as the small screen issue I was telling you about before. So I did some research and I found out that the G85 was actually able to support HDMI out. That meant I no longer had a problem shooting on a small screen anymore.
That's what she said.
During my time with the camera, there were times where this small mighty camera pushed me to do something greater, try to find different angles and actually film something. This camera was the beginning of my filmmaking career today. 2024 was the first time that I didn't use the camera at all. And so that's when I noticed, okay, I didn't give this camera a proper goodbye at all. With all of the shoots, the lessons that I've learned coming from this camera, like I couldn't thank the camera. Usually people would say, round of applause for yourself, pat yourself on the back, but honestly, I thank the tool. This has been my camera since 2020, with highs and lows. And after a year of putting it down, I miss it. There's no doubt that I'll use it again, and there's already a future for it in 2025. So I'll apply those lessons to the future, because all the lessons that I've learned on this camera are unforgettable.
Didn't he forget the first time?
Follow me as I try to build my filmmaking career as a Micro Four Thirds shooter, and together we can learn about the filmmaking world that we're creating today. If you've liked the content that you've seen today, feel free to like and subscribe. And until then, live again.